So, getting used to all these new places still. The Treasury Minister, I mean, it's been a long time, obviously, in health. And I thought, first time we've had you on the interviews, really settling in, and obviously I've got to ask you about the budget, but I'll come to that in a minute. First of all, how are you finding this position? As challenging as health, or completely and utterly can't describe them, or what?
It's as challenging as health. I think whatever role you take on in government, there's challenges. The challenges are different, but they're still there. I'm enjoying Treasury. Obviously I was sad to leave health behind.
So would you have stayed if
I've said all along I would, and I've said this to you, and during the election campaign I would do any job I was asked to do. The Chief Minister asked me to take on Treasury, and I was delighted to do it.
Okay. I mean, with the health thing on, there's a tribunal going on. I can't really go into that, although it is in the public domain. Certain things, it's quite worrying what we're hearing of that sort of thing. But do you think we can be secure, as well as you know anyway, in the health of the Isle of Man and the people who look after us? How's that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't comment on anything that's ongoing in terms of a tribunal.
Sure.
What I would say is we have a lot of hard, dedicated working staff among our health services. We have a lot of people very committed, and they are delivering day in, day out on the healthcare of the island. I spent nearly 4 years as Minister for Health, and it was my absolute privilege to head up that department. I got to meet some absolutely amazing people who went above and beyond, and I think actually with a lot of what we do in the health service, it's up there with some of the best health services elsewhere. Okay.
Well, this no doubt come back to that, but not necessarily with you, of course, in the future. Should we talk about the electricity and the gas and the whole thing, which is probably throwing your ideas of the budget up in all sorts of directions? I mean, there's some very big worries going on about the people who are right at the bottom of our society, who live very, carefully. You have offered money in this sort of thing, but it seems that the price of gas is still going up, and there's going to be more issues ahead.
Well, actually, there's been more volatility in the price of gas. The price of gas has been spiking, but it's also been coming down again.
But it's over 600% up,
it's still above where it was. Normal circumstances in the market, you'd find the price per therm at around about 80p on past experience.
And it's now,
the averaging now has been about £1.70.
But
it has been a lot higher.
Yeah.
It's been actually up around about £4.74, I think was the actual peak.
Yeah.
So that was obviously quite substantial. We have put mechanisms in place, so we've done the winter fuel allowance payment, which we opened up much wider than it normally is, so people who are on EPA, and also not just those who were within the benefits system, but we recognised there were people who would be above the level of benefits that were struggling, so we created a graduated scale above that to allow those people to apply for the winter fuel payment as well, to try and help ease it.
How much of a challenge is that for things like the budget then for you? Is that now factored in, sort of thing?
Well, obviously you've got to be very careful what I say. The budget isn't presented.
I'm going to try my best to get something.
You're always going to try and
try my best. But seriously, these things must be a nightmare to some degree, because there's volatility, and it's going to affect the electricity prices. It's going to affect the cost of living on the Isle of Man.
I mean that's in the broader discussions around inflation, and inflation is a challenge. Inflation has been rising. Currently, the most recent inflation report has it at 6%. But we've seen these spikes before, and what we need to understand, and there's debate amongst economists around the world on this, they're pretty much divided 50-50 as to whether it's a temporary inflationary spike like was seen in 2018, or if it is a fundamental change and inflation is going to be around for a while. But obviously inflation impacts on everything. It impacts on everyone out there in the economy in terms of the goods they're buying, in terms of the cost of living. It impacts on government as well in terms of the services that we offer, the wages that we pay, and also the goods that we purchase for capital programmes, etc. So it's something that we do have to monitor.
How do you allay the fears of the pensioners who are on a fixed income? I mean, obviously they get a increase at whatever point, but how much do you agree? Do you go on the cost of living, or is it just what you can find?
Well, there's various different calculations. Each benefit has a slightly different calculation, and so there's various tests for the pension. But again, nice try, Paul, but I'm not going to preempt my budget ahead of time.
Are you looking forward to doing this, though?
I am. I'm looking forward to the budget. We've hopefully got a few good things to be announcing and push forward.
So it's not going to be all bad news, then? You are going to have a few morsels.
Well, it's the day after Valentine's Day, the budget, on the 15th of February, so we'll at least try and share some love.
Okay. It must be interesting, though, having Alf Cannon now as the head of this sort of thing. He knows more than anybody what goes on in there. By placing you in that position, it seems like he has a, you've done very well at the whole thing with being Minister of Health. So would you in trusted hands, should we say? You feel confident?
Well, obviously I'm privileged that the Chief Minister has entrusted me to take on the role of Treasury Minister. It's a great privilege to hold that, and a great responsibility as well, because ultimately you are in charge of the public purse, and I'm looking forward to the challenges that brings. And over the last few months I've enjoyed being in the job.
The fact of the matter is, though, the Isle of Man has to bring in money. You have to tax people and that sort of thing. But with the OECD and all this sort of thing, what's been recommended, the 15%, what's your view on that?
Well, the Isle of Man takes its international tax obligations very, very seriously.
And you often autonomous, apparently, the way I saw it.
We have done an awful lot of work over the years, and credit to the Chief Minister, former Treasury Minister, who very much got made sure the island lived up to its obligations. As Treasury Minister, I equally am committed to that, and it is important that as a well-regulated jurisdiction that we ensure that we have appropriate tax transparency and that we meet international standards, and that is the way the island has been the island policy for the last decade at least, and it will be the island policy going forward in this administration as well.
Are we still attracting, though, the right people to the island? I mean, that's your job, right, to incentivise those people who might have gone somewhere, Jersey, Guernsey, the Caymans, whatever. They're those sort of people who are looking for a base, aren't they? What makes the Isle of Man stand out?
I think one of the things that makes us stand out, and I think what people are looking for has changed over the last 10 years. I think what people look for now is a well-regulated jurisdiction with a good reputation of providing appropriate regulation, and the Isle of Man actually has that. We have a as you say, a very good name with the various different international bodies, and I think people look to that, and if they're going to set up a business, if they're going to actually operate on an international stage, which is the sort of businesses you're talking about, they want to be operating out of an island or a nation that they know is well regulated and going to meet its international obligations. That's what a lot of people now look for.
And how do you feel about the state owning things? I mean, you've got the steam packet now. You've got, I don't know, the villa. I'm just trying to think of things, Manx Radio, whatever. In certain ways, is that the way it should be, or do you think there should be more freedom for individuals and to flourish in that sense? God, that's an old saying, isn't it? Freedom to flourish. Remember that one?
Well, you brought one back from the archive there. We've discussed this before around my political philosophy.
Yes.
My general political philosophy has always been the fact that the state shouldn't own stuff unless absolutely necessary. I was fully supportive of the steam packet move. When I spoke in Tynwald on that, I made absolutely clear it was the lifeline for the island, and it was absolutely essential that we guaranteed that to ensure the future stability of our shipping routes. And actually, looking back with hindsight now, doing that just before the pandemic hit, I think actually did stabilise the routes much more than we would have had otherwise. So we've got to recognise as a small island of 85,000 people that there's not always going to be able to be competition in some markets, because people always point to the UK and, for instance, with electricity and everything else, and point out the numerous and very wide-ranging market. You're not going to get that because the volume of households on the island is lower than...
Well, you mentioned electricity. That's a government thing as such, yes. I mean, it's MUA, but it's still obviously totally thing. Do you want to take on gas, or will you think you may have to take on gas?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what might happen with the gas market.
Are you worried about what's going on?
Manx Gas is a private company
who make a profit. Have to make a profit.
Who's owned obviously by a separate private group. They operate the business as you would a private company. So I think But
they can't be making any money at the minute, because until you say you can have more increases on the firm, because we just discussed this whole thing. We're going around in circles slightly because there's a massive problem here, isn't there? Because it's so volatile a minute.
Well, in terms of their balance sheet, you'd have to ask Manx Gas that. I don't have any insight into that.
But could you see would you want it to be owned by the government? Would you want to nationalise it if it had to be done or something?
Paul, I'm not going to speculate on where we're going to go with the gas market in the future. As I say, Manx Gas is a private company. Its relationship with government is through the MUA, which is the commercial body within government that supplies the gas into the island and then obviously purchases it on behalf of Manx Gas.
That's right. So Manx Gas purchased the gas from the MUA?
So yes, the MUA basically hedge or buy on the instruction of Manx Gas,
Yes.
and then ship it into the island, because the MUA owns the pipes coming in at that, and then it is transferred to Manx Gas that owns the last mile to the house.